So a good example of this, though, is whether or not the patent system, as we currently have it in a post-industrial nation, in a third world country such as 60s India. So what happened in India in the late 60s was Indira Gandhi, in order to try and boost economic development in agriculture and medicine, said that patents would no longer cover products. They could cover process, but they can't cover products. And her intended result certainly came true, and that is that at the time, and I think thereafter, around about 60% of our medicine was made there. So, and a lot of our pesticides and things of that nature were also made there, a lot of chemicals. So naturally what happened was the Indian people reverse engineered all that and pirated all of it and then created their own generics in order to give their own people. Now this is not to be confused with Chinese current market of fake pharmaceuticals. That's entirely different. That's actually harmful through inaction. That's harmful through not having active ingredients. And that's, that's not the same as being organic and homesteaded. It's sent to America, UK, and Africa, and that's very different than a reverse engineered pill. Pirate pill, different than a reverse engineered pill, even though they're colluded all the time to, essentially make any kind of patent violation seem harmful. But the Indian, it was perfectly legal for Indians then to put out all these pills and make all these advancements in agriculture by not respecting patents, and they wouldn't be able to afford anything that actually was at a premium because of having an active patent. What happened over decades was their economy boosted, their illnesses went down, became self-sufficient with agriculture and all these things. And then finally, in 2005, they added products back to, through economic pressure largely through us, back to their list of things that would respect in patents. It's way too early to tell what the result of that will be. But this is an example of how that would occur overseas. And lastly, also having a human element to it when it comes to patents is food patents. And the big elephant in the room when it comes to food patents is Monsanto. It's kind of the Walmart of any kind of food patents, even though it's really recent. In 1994, they were able to patent Roundup Ready seeds, and this was essentially grew a crop that was resistant to Roundup, which is their most successful herbicide. And before this, you couldn't patent life, and you couldn't patent nature. But through heavy lobbying, they were able to patent life that was genetically modified. So they genetically modify the seed, and part of that was by being I forgot the word, but anyway, transgenic. There we go. Transgenic, part of what they did was they spliced it with certain bacteria, BT. And this bacteria would essentially kill any insect that tasted of it. So it was essentially both herbicide and pesticide in one with one pass of Roundup. So then they were able to patent it. And what happened, of course, subsequently is that Monsanto and DuPont as well bought up every seed company. Not every, I shouldn't say that, but they spent $8 billion gobbling up seed companies. And immediately when I heard this, I thought, well, what is this? What does this mean? Well, Monsanto, as a part of this, because they actually could patent the seed, it also meant that whatever seeds were created could not be reused the next year. So that is, if you planted Roundup Ready seeds, then whatever seeds came out of that you couldn't reuse. And I thought, well, how relevant is that? How much do they actually reuse anyway? There were already seed companies. Were they just buying all their seed anyway, so it's irrelevant that you couldn't reuse it? Not really. About 75% of all farmers now, granted this is worldwide, not US, relies on the majority of their seeds are reused seeds. In America, it fluctuated, but it sometimes reaches as high as 60%. So 60% would be your reused seeds, which was indeed a costly, labor-intensive process, but it was still cheaper than buying a seed. So that's the difference. 60%, 40% they would buy from these different seed companies that had no patents because they couldn't patent life. Well, Monsanto gobbled those up. They then could patent it, and you understand the problem with the math is 40% of your seeds come and you can't take any of those seeds and use them the next year, and you have 60% left over. Well, if only 60% of that you can use the next year, then you get the idea is that the Monsanto seeds you can't use over again are slowly going to take over any size crop. It's just a mathematical certainty. So that essentially evolved into you have to buy Monsanto. Now, there are all kinds of arguments about GMOs, one side or the other. There are pros and cons. You know, some of the pros essentially is it could ostensibly have a positive economic benefit, ecological benefit, because you're not using insecticides and because you're not tilling your soil in order to get rid of weeds, and therefore your soil can take on more water and you have less runoff and less soil erosion, et cetera, et cetera. Again, there are pros and cons on both sides. But I think the important question here again is, was patent acting as an incentive? And I thought about this, and I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure it had to. So here you have a chemical company, been around since 1902 with fabulous hits like DDT and Agent Orange. And at the time, generally regarded as safe, much as GMOs are now. But point of fact, they were a chemical company, and they were able to engineer a seed that would not die using their pesticide. So the question is, did they have to have a patent for that? And after all, for them to have a deal with somebody and sell them seed is a matter of contract law. It's not a matter of copyright law. Certainly they can't violate the copyright by, say, taking their seed and reusing it somewhere else or selling it to a neighbor, because that neighbor would then be infringing upon a patent. But if you're using your seed, that's a violation of contract. What the patent really did, unfortunately, was whenever those seeds cross-pollinated in any way, and the courts decided this, no matter how it was transmitted, the person who had any bit of Monsanto seed, therefore had plants that were owned by Monsanto. The seed equal ownership of the plant, essentially, no matter how it was cross-pollinated. So it ended up, they have a team of lawyers perpetually going out and inspecting fields and suing these farmers, and et cetera. So what does this have to do with incentivizing? I think it's possible, certainly, that a chemical company able to create a seed that would only respect their herbicide would have been just as driven to make that seed, whether or not it had a patent or not. And then, certainly, if they were the one actually selling the seed, they were simply the one saying, well, hey, if you want to use ours, you can use this, and you're only killing the weeds, your seed's going to be safe, etc. Then, the farmers would have an incentive in order to buy those. And if they were the ones selling the seed as well, would there be any incentive to put in any kind of technology that said, there's passive technology right now for not reusing the seed, but it's mostly by litigation. But they even have an incentive to have litigation, not for their seeds. They only care about making the herbicide. And that would, what has to be brought up when it comes to Monsanto, and they claim that they are not going to follow up on this, even though years ago they bought the company that created it, even after they told the public they weren't going to follow up on it, is terminated technology. And that is essentially that not only when they sell the seeds can they not reuse them, they have a physical barrier to using them because the seeds are sterile. The seeds absolutely can bear no more fruit after that first year. So they always have to return to the well, essentially. Again, they're not actually making these right now, but they own the company that creates them. So again, did patent law in this case incentivize the creation of that, or would this have come about organically from a company that still benefited greatly from a seed that didn't respond to the herbicide? So for all these examples, I just want to present the idea that by including process, by not having it solely to where it's products, by this essentially not necessarily growing term, but a growing girth of what is protected by patent, is it the same as it once was? Is it operating the same way? Is it actually incentivizing? Thank you.